Thank you to all members of the public, councillors and officers who are joining us for today's Climate Change Subcommittee meeting. Please be aware that the Council is video recording this meeting and this will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. I'd like to highlight some key points of the format. Please can I ask everyone to have their phones turned off or set to silent. The fire exits are via the doors out of the chambers and down the external fire escape stairs or via the main entrance that you enter the building through. In the event of a fire, the lift should not be used. The assembly point is outside the Royal Mail Parcel Office on West Street. Please remain seated unless you're invited to speak or need to take a comfort break. The toilet facilities are out in the corridor you enter through. Members of the public are invited to participate in the meeting with the key points as follows. Public participation is limited to a maximum of 4 minutes per person and must be relating to an item of business on the agenda. As chair, I will interject if needed to enforce this. When the public participation agenda item is introduced, please raise your hand to show you wish to speak, and I'll invite you to speak. If you're comfortable standing, please do so to ensure you can be heard across the room. You do not need to state your name when you start speaking if you do not wish to, but we ask that you clearly state which agenda item you're speaking about. I would ask that participants looking to leave the meeting wait until the end of an agenda item to limit distractions for other participants. And members of the public looking to leave the building will need to be escorted out by a council officer. If the meeting goes into confidential session, a 2 short minute break will be held to allow members of the public to leave. We don't have that on the agenda today. To all present, please remember to show respect to others in the meeting and avoid interrupting where possible to enable others to follow the meeting. If any councillor feels concerned about any aspect of the meeting or discussion, please clearly state point of order. I will then gesture for you to elaborate. If anyone present is felt to be behaving unacceptably, they can be ejected from the meeting by resolution. And finally, thank you for listening. On behalf of the Council, I would like to thank everyone for attending this Town Council meeting. And I would just like to, as Chair, reiterate that when I came into the full Council meeting, the first one, and saw all the councillors who'd signed up to be part of the committee, I thought, brilliant, thank you so much for rejoining and joining and being part of it. Thanks to the public for coming in, for the officers for supporting us. Right, so our first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. So I've had apologies from Councillor Taylor, and Councillor Richard Honeyman is kindly substituting in her place. Item number 2 is disclosure of interests, to deal with any disclosure by members of any disclosable pecuniary interests and interests other than pecuniary interests as defined under the Seaford Town Council Code of Conduct and the Localism Act 2011 in relation to matters on the agenda. Would anybody like to declare any interest tonight? No, we have none. Okay. Agenda item number 3 is public participation. So I invite anyone, member of the public who wishes to speak, to give any questions or brief representations in accordance with the relevant legislation and Seaford Town Council policy. Anyone like to speak? Yep, we'll start with you, lady at the front here.
Hi, I'm Gemma McFarlane, local resident, and run a CIC called Sharing Skills. I'd just like to congratulate you on the draft climate change policy. I know you have limited means, resources, as of what you can do, so, and I know that you've all been on to do the right thing, so yeah, that's brilliant. There's just one thing, so that a lot of the changes that need to be made will be made East Sussex County Council. So I'd ask that this council would ask when the time's come to push for East Sussex County Council to do the right thing. I noticed you put in the policy about cycling and walking, and yeah, that's East Sussex County Council need to improve that. So if you could back any campaigns, yeah, just to push them to do the right thing. can't see anything. I have one other thing. Okay, I'll go to my third thing because I can't remember the second thing. We would like to, as Sharing Skills, we would like to hold a sustainability fair next year, and we would like to ask you if you would support that. Yeah, I think we could meet with you at some point to discuss.
Thank you. Do you know the third point?
No, it's all right, go on.
Okay, maybe you might want to come back. Thank you very much for bringing up those points. It's a really good one about working with other councils or interfacing with them as appropriate to achieve our goals. So thank you for that, definitely noted, especially in terms of active travel. The sustainability fair, yes, I think we'd be happy to talk about that. Have you already started some discussions there? Louise, do you want to say anything about that? Okay, not right now, but yeah, we'll definitely come together and talk about that because that sounds really positive, so thanks for bringing that up. And
Simon McFarlane. Well, the first thing was the introduction of the composting toilets. I just wanted to congratulate the council, whoever's idea it was, and also for backing it, because I think we're going to have to make a lot of changes and people are very scared of change. I imagine that's, the idea of composting toilets is just going to blow some people's minds, but by putting these things in place, will help them to normalise them, and then that will stop people being so scared of the change we need to make. And we've been told a lot of stuff, a lot of horror stories about heat pumps without realising I've got one and it works perfectly fine. So it's the same thing, people are scared of change, so I think the town council doing something so prominent is really helpful. The second thing was we held the cycle fests recently in Salts. There was an area that we used, the picnic area, and it wasn't cut till a long while time after everything else was cut, and I just think that when it was cut, it was done perfectly. There was a big strip around the outside, which was good because it still left the biodiversity, but making sure that any areas the council does have where they need to be cut should be cut so it doesn't cause any backlash at all, because people throw the baby out with the bathwater, unfortunately, with this, and some people are misunderstanding the whole point of May just because they're annoyed about small parts of it. The third one was sort of, Kevin Rice, who I was doing the cycling study with recently with Seaford Community Partnership, asked me to bring up about the local transport plan 4, and is it something that Seaford Town Council would sort of actively get involved with the consultation, because we've come up with some ideas and there'll be a report published very soon. But obviously they feed in things like that. That's much higher up, but the town council has an opportunity to interject with that as well and actually, agree with some of the points sort of. That was all.
Well, thank you very much for bringing those issues up. Thanks for your comments about the compostable toilets. They were put in rather quickly, and we're aware there are a few teething issues, but we hope to be getting, overall it hopefully is going to be a positive trial. It is a trial, as we say, and the whole question about how to sort of bring people along and take people with us with these changes so that people don't feel sort of scared or overwhelmed, I think something we're going to bear in mind as the committee goes forward, so thank you for that. We'll note about the grass cutting and the wider issues. I know that's been a hot topic in general this summer. And can you just clarify, sorry, the local transport plan, who was
It's
doing
Sussex County
that?
Council,
Yeah,
so it'll be something that the town council can feed into, but you've probably got a lot more weight than individuals, so it's useful to...
Yeah, I mean, we will, in the policy that, which we're going to be discussing later on, we're talking about active travel and so on, so...
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, opportunity for the...
Thanks very much. Okay, right. So.
No, I was going to just come back on the last point that someone made regarding that cycle plan.
Yeah.
I wasn't the SCP actually leading on that up to a point. So I think I don't know, there's a better communication issue there anyway, so you may don't want to interfere. I know there's been a study done. Some of his colleagues finished a big study as well. It's with various people, but I don't think it's really moved out. And then someone's trying to make it a bit more prominent. That's how I understand it.
Yeah, my understanding from having been in email contact is that it's coming on and it just hasn't been published quite yet. My allowed to ask the public. Do you know when it's likely to be published?
We were just waiting for appendices, but it's been a while, unfortunately. Got held up by the consultant. So, but that's the same study. That's the Seaford Community Partnership study. That's the one that comes from the Ouse Valley
And the
Climate Action.
timescale on the East Sussex County Council one?
They're looking for. I can't remember the dates on the.
Okay, we'll look into it, and we'll try and mesh them together if we can. Yeah, Councillor Vaughan.
Usually, because it's to do with like highways and transport, consultations like that would go to the Planning and Highways Committee
Right,
usually.
okay.
So
Okay, that's great.
So they
know
can
that.
also link into this committee if need be, but
okay,
you
thank
would
you.
probably go to Planning and Highways.
Okay, great, so we'll hook into that as we can. Yeah, fantastic. Right, okay, so we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is the climate change update report, which Louise Lawrence has kindly put together.
Shall I do an intro?
Yes, please, that'd be great.
So the update report runs from page 5 to 8, and within this meeting it's to note and feedback on the contents. There's also an action to discuss and agree to the development of plastic-free events charter. We've dropped down in the report to point 2, which is actually on page 9, which is a climate change draft emergency policy, and that is the action there is for us to discuss. Actually, you. It's not us, but to discuss and agree a policy to be finalised by the Chair and myself, which would then go on to full council with a recommendation for approval. So that's on page 11 of this report. The other items in this report going on from point 3 on page 5 through are actually not point 3, but go to point 4, are all updates on and pulling together what's happened in the past to try and your new committee, so just to pull those into your horizon. The point 3 is slightly different, that's a new point.
Yeah, I think point 3 is a really key one for us here, because we're a subcommittee. How do we influence and affect change across, ideally, the whole of the council's activities? That won't happen overnight. So I believe in previous meetings there was discussion about, as well as having financial considerations in reports, that there would also be an environmental implications or environmental considerations in there. So that's something which the process and how that actually works would need to be looked at. I know various other councils do similar things. But I think that would be quite a good way, which the kind of decision making, the environmentally responsible decision making, could be introduced right across the council, bit by bit, obviously. So yes, to me that seems like quite a good way to do it, and I invite your comments and thoughts on that as councillors. Councillor Meek?
No.
Yeah, I think we'll go now and then we can go through the rest, which is more of an
Point 2
update.
first. Do we have to go in the order of this list?
I think we do that afterwards, because that's, sorry.
If you explain all through the particular agenda item, and then the committee then come back with any questions they want to raise on various points. I think that's normally the procedure.
Yeah.
Okay, if there is some,
Just take me
sort of
through.
explain her report.
Yeah, of course I can. So the climate change policy, that's, as I say, that's on page 11, and that is a pulling together of the work you did before, where you looked at 4 different council's climate change policies and the likes and dislikes on
Sorry,
those.
can we just stick to agenda item 4 and not agenda item 5?
So I'm on the climate emergency policy, which is number 2.
Okay.
Is that?
Yeah, but we're going to discuss that in a minute though, aren't we?
Fine.
Yeah, we're going to
Fine.
do that.
So
Just
So do you want, okay, so that,
The rest
okay.
of it, the rest.
Let's go to 3 then.
Yeah.
Fine. Landed there, no, great, we've got there. So 3 is back to your point.
Yeah, so the environmental implications consideration from the council report. anyone like to question or comment on that?
I think we're going
I think
going
that's
through the whole
And
report,
then come back.
and then members of this committee will
Oh, I
raise
see.
questions.
Okay, so then we got the review of the single-use plastic policy, which is a policy which is due for review 2023, 2024, so we're doing some work to start looking at what that policy might look like. There is a current version on the town's website, town council's website, you can have a look at, and we'll submit that in September. We've got a creation of a plastic-free events charter, which there is a plastic-free events charter within the single-use plastic policy, but this suggestion is that we pull it out, make it a standalone A4 tick sheet, and then we use it for every single event. We hand it out, and also we put it onto our website and make it much more usable for anybody who's holding an event. The electric car chargers, we've got work going on looking at the siting of those. Lewes District Council are currently looking to put 3 in car parks around Seaford. I've just recently found out.
Yeah, they've installed some already.
Yeah, so that will come back in September. The plastic audit, so the council had a plastic audit a time ago. I'm going to put the date in when that happened. And we're going to have another one done, just to look at the implications and how far we've gone, and actually show leadership in terms of being a plastic-free, or as plastic-free as we can be in the working space. Grounds maintenance working group proposal, that was a suggestion that came from one of the other committees, and this is a heads up really that there will be a working group put together. I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to volunteer to go on it, so we're just running that through every committee paper, so that if you are interested in being part of that, or we look at our grounds maintenance, then you can join. South Hill Barn feasibility study, so we've got South Hill Barn up by Seaford Head, and that is at the moment just a sort of set of walls. It's got a roof, but it's jolly leaky with not really fit for purpose at all, and this is about looking at how we could get electric and water up there. So this is a sort of the work. There's been a budget set aside to do that piece of work, and we've currently got that work ongoing. We'll be feeding back to you in the next October subcommittee meeting. The compostable toilets, those have been introduced at Martello because we know the toilets aren't coping, and we're about to refurb those. So the thought was to support the toilets as they are. We'll put in 3 extra. We went for, it was either going to be portaloos or compostable toilets. So Helen is quite experienced and new to our team, suggested we try the compostable. So it's a little bit cutting edge, but we're really excited about it. Going forward, we would want to look at and bring something to this committee about using compostable toilets more widely, and possibly in the Martello fields, where it would be nice to site some permanent toilets. That's it, conclusion. Yeah, so we're really, really busy, loads of work, but it's very exciting.
Thank you very much for that, Louise. Right, so now if we run through item by item on the report and ask for questions. Okay.
Raise their hands.
Yeah, okay, so
Next question.
may we have questions from members, please? Councillor Buchanan.
Yes, thank you for that. On the barn feasibility study, this at the moment is specifically set out for trying to determine how to get power and water to the site. What I would like to propose is that there's a brief that is actually created by Seaford Town Council to determine the direction that the barn is going to take. Because at the moment it's actually not clear what the purpose of the barn might be. So this brief would help to define a vision, how the barn would be used and how it would be serviced. It might also even feed into the feasibility study for the power and water, because at the moment one's not even sure how much power you might need, I suppose, eventually, to service what could be a destination space for the town up on the hill. So I suppose my proposal is, I would propose that the Seaford Town Council undertake this creation of a brief that would actually help define what we believe the purpose of the barn would be. It's the vision of how it might be used.
Thank you for that, Councillor Buchanan. Councillor Honeyman?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things following on what Councillor Buchanan was saying. I believe that there's already been various studies on there. There is a way forward what the barn's going for, unless that's all just been halted. But it has been, because we've been talking about weddings, like a wedding venue, for example.
Can I?
So I mean, so there have been quite a lot of reports about. So I just wondered. I think it's pretty viable that we probably do need electricity up there once sort of other, and obviously water. Whether or not you need to spend another 20,000 on the feasibility study, but when you probably know the answer anyway, that's another issue. But obviously, how do you get the water up there and the electricity is the main issue, isn't it? Not so much do we need it, because I would say we probably do need it up there. But then, of course, there's how much you're going to get up there, isn't there? Because you can, if it is going to be more than doing ad hoc exhibitions, which is what it's doing at the moment, which is fine, then you probably don't need so much power up there. But it depends on the extent, because it's something what you can cope with. So that's one question, if that's okay. I've got a couple of other ones.
Yeah.
Would you want me to?
Is it relating to the barn or?
No, there are other ones. No.
Can we just take the barn
Okay,
first?
the barn,
I think
okay.
whilst we're on it, Councillor Gorman.
I know Walk the Chalk when they first discussed it, they were looking at putting a wind turbine up there temporarily and said that they would share that data with us afterwards of actually that would go towards our feasibility study. So it might be worth just putting it on hold, just let's get that data back first, and then we can then see what actually more do we need from it, rather than starting to spend money now that actually that information was given to us because we've allowed them to use.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Gorman. I actually had a district council tour of Walk the Chalk last night, and yes, they are going to be putting a temporary wind turbine up there. So it'd be great if we can contact them and ask if they're willing to share that data.
They said they would, because that's what I asked.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's obviously one component of the whole system. Yeah. But yes, I think historically, I'm obviously new to the council, but I've heard of various ambitions and aspirations for the barn. But is anyone aware of a definitive document, as in a sort of strategic vision for the barn about what it should actually be? And again, addressing these things of how often it's used. Is it permanent use or seasons use, ad hoc use, and so on? But I don't think we do we? No. Yes, Councillor Warren.
With the barn, there was, thoughts about having wedding venues up there, but we have to be very careful because it's in a dark sky area and you can't have any lights at night, because otherwise it will affect that.
Yeah.
So it's basically, daytime use to a certain degree.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, certainly where there'll be various sort of limitations for the site because of where it is, and so on. So, Councillor Buchanan?
Yeah, sorry, just to be clear, I'm not specifically talking about the feasibility study that's discussed here, but related to the barn, it's how you set out a brief for what you would like, or what the town council would like the barn to be. The talk and the discussions about weddings, how big a space do you have? Where's the catering? How do you, art exhibitions? How do you actually? Is it a multi-purpose space? Is it, the brief would actually be to set out that vision, and then coming off the brief, if it's all, however that may or may not be agreed, then you can move further on, with more other feasibility studies. And scheme designs and things like that for specific areas of how the brief has been assigned. There was discussion the other day about trying to make the barn, I think I used the word exemplar for energy and sustainability as a building. And at the moment, according to this, it makes approximately £1,000 a year. It's a drain on council. So the purpose of the brief would be to assign or imagine what it might be, and then, you know, what income one might get from that, and how to make it into, you know, something that will actually attract people on a much broader level than it is at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Meek.
Thank you, Chair. To come in on the discussion of it, the previous administration the previous town clerk had been very keen on making a wedding venue, certainly. There had been an offer from, for private tender from a wedding supplier who had offered to pay in the first year £40,000 for the venue, rising I think to £70,000 a year, which would have been, that's what they said it was worth to them. So, however, the dark skies policy came in between those decision-making processes, so that rather debunked that idea of a wedding venue. However, I always maintained, in the previous administration, I think I maintained, you could still use it as a daylight wedding venue, and then encourage people to go and use the view for your reception in the evening. And you could have electric transport down to the view afterwards, which means, and then you could take people back to the station after that, if you set it up as a huge, great business model. To create the wedding venue, I think at the barn, there was a study done, which officers spent quite a lot of time on, and it is, I don't know where it is, but it's in amongst the annals of the town council business. I think it was going to cost £2.5 million. I think, do you remember a figure like that? Something like that. It was quite a lot of money, where we lose sharp intakes of breath. It was a huge amount of money, but this was envisaging putting all infrastructure in. There would be a cafe down the long barn on the side, purpose-built with toilets, there would be electricity, there would be water, and on the other side of it there would be buildings which would house tables and chairs and seating for a multi-purpose venue, if you like. So it was a huge undertaking, which a lot of people wouldn't want, because it would change the nature of the barn completely. And councillors on the previous administration did say, why can't we just use it like it is, with some modifications? There's a raised area with a concrete plinth in there, which is quite awkward, and maybe you need to cut that out and put in a proper floor. But, and also make the roof secure, which is another of my points now. But I absolutely agree with you, Councillor Gannon. I think that, you know, we do need a brief now, because if the wedding venue is out of the way, I mean, it could still be a daylight wedding venue, but ultimately I think your idea of a sustainability centre is brilliant, because it as just like the composting toilets, it shows that the council's been proactive in climate change ideas, showing the town what can be done. The town can be proud of it, and it'll only encourage people to do similar things themselves. You know, just as a byproduct of that, we did talk about a wind turbine up there, and there was all sorts of reservations about the South Downs National Park would probably say no, but apparently they've given permission for a wind turbine at High Farm. That's past planning already, I believe. So that's a precedent. You can then go to them and say, well, you know, this is going to be a sustainability centre. You've got to allow us to have a wind turbine up here. I think there's somewhere else in this document it says there is the possibility of taking water from the borehole on the golf course, which could go up there and get purified, possibly for drinking water as well as just for flushing toilets or whatever we might need up there. That's quite a long distance to go, but I mean it is possible to pump it up there.
Thank you.
Just to say the borehole, when the divining was done, looking for boreholes, there is a suitable spot at South Hill Barn to sink a borehole. So we wouldn't need to run the water up. We already know that that water is there, and we could use that.
Thank you. Okay. Any other councillors? Yes, Councillor Matthews.
Yeah. For consideration, when you kind of thought, the council makes some money from filming down the South Downs. I'm just wondering whether any proposal also looks at how we can complement the people that are coming up for filming, so they can use that as maybe a useful space. So also it might prevent some this and whatever waste down the bottom, you know, down on the beauty spot. But so that would be my suggestion. That we also make sure that we consider, and maybe would attract even more filming and also you can spread the word about sustainability centre as well. So.
Thank you, very synergistic idea, that's the word I can use, Councillor Borman.
We also have to consider that where it is, that actually the special interest of that area up there, and we already work with as landowners, we already work with who is it that
Wildlife Trust,
and they look after the land up there because of
yeah.
how special it is up there. So
Yeah.
whatever we do up there, we've also got
Being
to be,
consulted.
make sure that it
Yeah.
doesn't push too many people up there to then just
Yeah.
kill the land as well.
Thank you for that point.
So I've spoken to the Wildlife Trust. They gave me a tour, which was absolutely brilliant. And we looked at the barn, which is actually just outside the triple SI. Yeah, it's just on the other. And I said to them, you know, there's discussion, this report's going through. What do you think? And they said, oh, please, we do so much teaching. We could do teaching in this space.
Thank you. So, from what I'm hearing, sitting here in the middle of this chair, there are lots of ideas, lots of positive ideas and things we'd need to take into account, which perhaps would be more of a discussion, a wider discussion in the council, certainly with community services, I would imagine. Am I right? But I do feel that perhaps it gives weight to, you know, what we need to do is pin down what it could be used for, even if that's just narrowing down the options, so that then we can size and address the right systems to the building to enable what we might want to do in the future. So coming back to Councillor Buchanan's proposal, do I need to put some wording on it? Yes. So
a seconder as well.
yeah. So you've summarised it.
Well,
Would you like
it's
to
only a
go
sentence,
for it?
isn't
Yeah,
it?
go for it.
For the barn to prepare a Seaford Town Council brief to define the vision for how the barn will be used and serviced. And that will cover the areas that we've been discussing here.
Councillor Luke?
Sorry, can I just come in on that, because I just wanted to know. It says that there's going to be a feasibility study, and the budget for that was £20,000. That seems to me to be a huge amount of money to just assess the feasibility of putting electricity and water in. Is that to go to independent consultants? Louise, thank you.
No, so what's happened is they've done a budget setting figure, and with the task of finding out whether it's reasonable to get water and electric there. But actually, it's not going to cost that 20. I'm saying that on tape, so I'm feeling nervous now. But we already know the water's there, so it'll be a borehole, so we know that. The electric, we were talking about the possibility of some of the greener electricity companies or sort of energy companies being involved. So I think that money is ring-fenced to discover about getting power up to the site, but actually could we, if you're doing another proposal, then that money's still sitting there.
Thank you, Louise. So presumably, given that, would it be worthwhile going to some kind of consultant to find the feasibility of the kind of thing we're envisaging and what that might entail, or what we had in mind, whether it's education and all those things, because it seems if we've got that ring fenced, we need to spend it well. I don't know if it takes an outside consultant, but there are people who are very well experienced in sustainability centres. They've been around for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And rather than take officer time to do that, to have a professional do it, it seems to me would be a very good idea, because then they'd be able to advise into what the brief would then be, would they? I think
Maybe we're, my understanding is that's sort of slightly coming the other way from it. So I think as a council we kind of need to narrow down, correct me if we need to narrow down our vision, the purposes for which the barn could be used for. Unless we want a complete options appraisal, but I think that might be more than 20k if we're looking for that and systems. But if we think as a council, you know, we know we've got some limitations in terms of the siting, in terms of what we might want to support as a council, considering officer time and so on. Come up with, you know, 1, 2 or 3 of those, and then we go to the consultants, engineering consultants and what have you, for the systems that might be appropriate. I don't know, I mean, looking at other places, like for example in Hastings Country Park, you might know the Bale House there, where that was a complete new build, but it was a kind of, I think it was passive house standards, but they used a lot of straw bales and so on in it, so they don't have any heating apart from solar gain, and I mean it's fantastic, but we've obviously got an existing building which needs some repairs in itself. But my understanding is that we need to decide as a council what we might want to do with it, and then find out how to make that happen. Or is that, Councillor? I don't know who was first there. So Councillor Honeyman.
Yeah, I think we're wandering off the brief, Chair,
Yeah.
as far as I can see.
Yeah.
And I still think officers need to look at what was proposed before.
Yeah.
Don't forget, we do have 2 educational establishments very nearby. We do, there's a place at Exeter and along the valley as well. Sorry, slightly further down the valley. There's another place, what's it called?
Foxhole, is it?
Yeah, between the valley and the actual haven itself, there's another place where there's education is as well. So we do have 2 relatively nearby places. So I still think you need to try and revisit the expensive option for weddings and see what's in that, and see if you can. I can't remember the exact briefing as well. I'm trying to wrap my brains. I'll probably get it somewhere.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Moore.
According to this report, 9.4, there's a substantial amount of work that's already being done by the officers. And I think if the officers take on board what's been said with this committee, and then report back with costings at the next climate change subcommittee in October.
Louise, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, so we are looking, the council, the last council paper asked us to look at the electricity and the water. That's all.
That's it, no, nothing else.
We haven't been asked to look at anything else.
No.
So if you want us to go the next step between now and then you probably need a motion to say, please could you, and without constraining in any way, it might be that we ask around to see what sort of cost a brief would be. We actually maybe can come in within the budget, and then we can come back to this committee saying, this is what we found out, this is what the next steps would be. It's within budget, it's not within budget. But that's slightly wider, so we probably would need the motion to say, could we?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Right, so as I understand it, so we've got one motion which is to propose a brief of what the council might want to use the barn for, and another one to ask officers to go and scope out feasibility studies for more systems than what you've had at the moment, so more holistically for the whole building and drainage.
I think it could be one motion.
One? Okay.
Which is,
Combine the two.
Yeah. Okay. Right, okay. I've never done this before. Right, okay. So we'd like a brief to be, so a brief informed by officers but to be discussed by councillors. Yeah. About what the purpose of the barn will be going forward. And also then for the officers to go and scope out feasibility of the various systems and work that would need to be undertaken to enable that to happen.
And the costings.
And the costings.
Obviously,
Yeah. Is that fair? Yeah, okay, right, so would someone like to propose that?
I think.
Well, Councillor Buchanan.
Whatever you said, that's the one.
That's very dangerous. Seconder, Councillor Meek, thank you very much. Okay, great. Right, so we have an action
That'd be
now.
that.
Show of hands, everyone
That's
in
that was all
favour.
right, that one.
Excellent, that's everybody. Good, we've got there.
Sorry, just one last thing on this topic. My understanding is there's no drawings of the barn at the moment. Having a simple drawing to know the area of it and how the space is laid out and stuff like that would actually be very, very handy. Also something. Because you can't plan without a drawing. easily.
Surely that
They're
would be
awesome.
title.
I've never seen them. We have
Yeah.
seen them.
Ah, okay,
Yeah.
so
They are valid. They are
Yeah.
valid.
there's a whole bunch of stuff that needs
Yeah,
to
another
be
action will
sorted.
locate drawings and presumably they'll be with the title.
Sorry, but I'm just going to say, obviously there was kind of drawings made up from the previous plan, I believe, which is how they came to that figure.
Okay.
There was
New-
an officer
new-
study
new
done.
people on the block.
Right.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah,
fine.
right, so we've got an action there, fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everybody. Right, questions on other points
Can I-
in this
Can
report?
I still
Councillor
say
May.
something about the barn?
Yes.
Just I seem to remember that it must have been at least about a year ago that £5,000 was earmarked for putting right the roof and doing some various repairs to windows and things to stop the ingress of water. I remember that the last arts fair up at there, about last August, people were complaining about it, and we put £5,000 aside. Has that work been instigated? And if not, I wonder why it's taking such a long time to just patch the roof, really. £5,000 was put aside for that. Because we can't hire it out very well if it's still got leaks in it.
Simple answer, yes.
It has been instigated.
It's, yeah, so we were going to start it this Thursday, but there's some clearance to happen, so we're just sorting out to make sure that that's going to happen before the next event that's coming up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I also, there's just one other
Quickly.
thing as well. I did send a message to Sharon last Friday, which I copied you into, saying that some people have been waiting for a contract for an event in August, and they just haven't got anywhere with worrying about whether it's actually going to happen or not, or whether they believe that the council said yes, but they haven't had a contract and they've had no kind of details of going forward. It would be good if we are going to run things there, it needs to be efficiently run so that people know where they are with arts events that we want to have there.
Thanks for that point. I'm sure that will be taken up outside
Thank
the
you very
meeting.
much.
Okay, I'm conscious that we've got to agree, discuss and potentially agree to the development of a plastic-free events charter, which is one of the recommendations for this report. Are we happy to move to that, or do people have questions on things that are out with the barn and out with the plastic-free events charter that you'd like to raise?
I just wanted to know if we're going to create a plastic-free events charter, will it be mandatory, and if so, how can we enforce it with people who are going to want to do events in the town? How do we make sure that they adhere to the charter, and how do we enforce that? Because once the event happens, as we know from experience, it's often really difficult. Oh, we run out of paper cups, so should we have to use plastic ones? Kind of example. I just think if we do that, we've got to really work out how we're going to police that, if you like, because otherwise the whole thing breaks down, you know.
Yeah, thanks for that point. Okay, are we happy to go on to discuss this in a wider point then? So the plastic-free events charter, as Louise said, it was in the single-use plastic policy. We now want to have it stand-alone so that it can be deployed by other events organisers who are organising things in the town, particularly on town council and town council venues. So yeah, just to recap, the aim of the charter is to encourage all events held within Seaford to follow the guidance and identify best practice within the policy, and in doing so support the town of Seaford in maintaining its status as a plastic-free town. We've had thoughts from Councillor Meek about how do we actually do that in practice. Is it something whereby people will sign up to in advance, or will it be compulsory? Will it be some sort of accreditation that people get for their event?
All good points.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Walraven.
You're going to mention bonfire, aren't you?
Eh?
You're going to mention bonfire, aren't you?
Well, no, I'm not.
Well, I could, I will.
Yeah.
I still think this needs to be mentioned.
Sorry.
Councillor Walraven.
No, I was just going to comment on Forces Day. I was in charge of the catering, and we had no plastic whatsoever. Everything was like paper plates, paper cups, everything, wooden spoons, everything was recyclable, and there was no waste. We also decided as a committee not to have rubbish bins, and because last year we did, and nobody used them. This year we decided not to have them, and we had no litter whatsoever after the event. So I think we either we dictate to people that no, you don't have rubbish, but if they use the common sense and say we encourage you to have no plastic, I think they would listen more to that and, you know, sort of, and it like each like the Rotary with the Tavern and the Tent, I mean, they charged £1 for their, say you wanted a pint of beer, if you took that glass or container back, you got your £1 back.
Yeah.
So it was, so people are listening, especially our local people.
Thank you. Thanks,
yeah.
that's encouraging to hear. Yeah. Councillor Holman?
I mean, thank you, Chair. I mean, I will re-mention Bonfire Night again because that is one of the most significant areas of abuse. And it's probably not the same, it's not probably just applies to this town like the other towns of Sussex, which is over the Bonfire Night period, as you know, from September to November. But it was, I know Councillor, the former Councillor Rodney Reid, the previous administration, he did a lot of work with plastic free and with the Bonfire Society trying to alleviate this. But last October on the night, I don't know how many trolleys there was with the stalls with all the plastic, all the funny lights and the LED lights and everything all going around. There must have been a good dozen, wasn't there? And I mean, they were sort of encouraged to move around, and they were sort of blocking off them. What am I trying to say? But the event generally, the processions of things, they were in the way around the War Memorial, and it was. But I mean, they did move on. I don't think that side of things was creating an issue because I know they were basically in the wrong. But I would say it did leave a sore point, and I know Councillor Reid did try to throw it through, but I think we're probably stuck with it at the moment.
I'm aware that that's quite a difficult one because the licences they get from the police, am I right? And it's not something which is necessarily within a direct control. But yeah, something to come back to. So that's definitely something to bear in mind. With the Plastic-Free Events Charter, so at the moment, one question I had is, does anyone off the top of their head, who's that outside body representative for Plastic-Free Seaford?
So we met
You met with them. And are we saying, let us know what you intend to use instead of plastic, for example, with the catering and so on? Are we going that far? Are we giving suggestions? I know there was quite a lot of talk about using compostable cups and are they genuinely compostable and all these various types of things, or do we, that's something which I'd like to sort of discuss, is how far do we go as a council? Do we say, don't use it, let us know what you're doing instead, don't use it, here are some suggestions, or sort of how do we practically go about that?
So in terms of the charter, we met with the lady who runs the Seaford sort of plastics, and we were going to draw up the policy charter working with her, and then we would bring this back for you to have a look at. And in terms of enforcement and in terms of measure, those were things that you could have a discussion about how far you want to go. One of the things we were going to put in the charter was a suggested alternative use, suggesting people move away from certain perceived greener options and towards areas we're now realising are better use. So we want to make a charter that is live,
flexible enough to adapt to the latest.
Yeah, so we won't be drawing this up on our own.
Okay, that's really good to hear. Okay, so any more questions on that, or shall I go? Right, any more questions on the report more widely?
I would just like to thank you and for the compostable toilets. I think you only have to see the reaction. Well, I don't do Seaford Notice Board, but I've heard from my wife the big reactions from Seaford Notice Board. It is a difficult thing, and as the public guardian said, you have to do these things and people resist, but actually then they do come around to it. I have to say, I went down and looked after those reports. I went down and looked, and I thought, well, I can understand that some people are going to go, oh, it's not very nice. And it's difficult because, you know, it's not as sanitary seeming and smell-free as in your house. But then, you know, when you go and have the blue flush systems at, you know, rock concerts or something, or, you know, in a field in Glastonbury or whatever, it's pretty sorted there too. So you've got to kind of realise where you're going. I would like to thank you for that. I think, you know, this is something we could use at Seaford Barn, but we've got to really get the right type of thing. And I think it's really good to see how this works, to see how the walk chalk one will work up there as well, and learn from those going forward. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Meat. Also, I was down at the Seaford allotments the other day, and they had a compostable toilet in there for quite a while, which is quite a different system. And actually, when you go in, it apart from one or two things, it feels like, I'm saying this on tape, feels like using a normal toilet in that the tanks are separate and underground and so on. So there are lots of different designs, and I think it's great that we've got a have to put something in near the Martello, and yes, it's what are we comparing it to? That's cracking. Right, okay, so for this report we've got two recommendations, the first of which is to note and feedback on the contents of the report, the second of which is to discuss and agree to the development of a plastic-free events charter. I'm in a position now to have someone to propose that. Councillor Walraven, somebody to second, Councillor Borman, and all those in favour. Excellent, everybody. Thank you very much. Right, that's great. So, now we'll move on to agenda item 5, which is the draft climate emergency policy, for us to discuss, feedback on, and recommend to full council for adoption. So our comment, we've obviously had the stakeholder workshop, we've had a workshop ourselves feeding into this with other stakeholders in the town as well. This has been collated by Louise into this draft policy here, and we're taking comments and suggestions at this meeting, which I will then pull together with Louise, finalise and put to full council for adoption. Sorry, just to clarify that. So, may I ask for feedback and comments? Councillor Borman.
Yeah, we obviously got members of the public involved to discuss all this, and it was great to come together with lots of ideas and then for this to be formulated from all our responses from the officers involved. So I'd like to thank officers who were involved in developing it. My only query is that it says the review date is 2028-2029, which is a long time away, because when we discussed it previously, we said get the policy and then review it within a year, because we might suddenly find as it goes along there's big changes that need. So I want to know why it's suddenly gone so far down.
Yeah. Do you want me to answer that?
Yes, please.
So one of the things when I was thinking about the policy, I looked at the plastic policy, which had all sorts of dates in it and suggested amendments, and it became out of date quite quickly. So what I've tried to do here is pull together all of your suggestions and thoughts and actually make them generic, so that the policy then covers pretty much anything you might want to do, with a view to then reviewing the detail, because this is the policy, this isn't what you actually do, this isn't the work. So I thought in terms of the revisit, because it was so generic, it could go out and go into a 5-year cycle.
Well, thanks for that explanation. Yes, Councillor Warren.
I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I agree with Councillor Gorman. I think we need to review it within 12 months. Okay, we could have it before us in 12 months' time. Doesn't need any alterations, that's fine. But something can crop up.
For a brand new policy.
Yeah. Okay, so just to say also, with regarding this policy, I was envisaging that between now and the next, or in time for the next climate change subcommittee meeting, that we develop a strategy for how we're going to achieve things in the policy that we might want to achieve in the short, medium and longer term. So in terms of actually how we enact it, I envisage that as something going forward. But yes, in terms of the policy itself, maybe it would be sensible to have a kind of review in the sort of 1 year period and then maybe set it for a few years up. Would you like to propose that, Councillor Borman? Anyone got any comments before we do so? Councillor Hannigan?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so there's 12 points here, and at the end it says therefore, and I put the word therefore. So when it says this can be achieved, does that mean all the 12 points? Or does that mean just the last point, point 12? That's not very clear in my eyes what it means, that last bit when it says this can be achieved by then 4 bullet points. So that's one question. When you say, you mean on those bullet points, local websites, do you mean basically just communication strategy generally, including social media? Do you mean that? That's one question. And also, when you say you're going to work with individuals in groups around, how do you know what's already out there, in the sense of what the special people that may be doing, like maybe projects SEA are doing? I have no idea. Maybe family thinking around. How do you know what is going on in the town, and vice versa? You don't want to duplicate what's going on, or how do you envisage those sort of organisations to help do what you want to do? Because if you're going to use their expertise, so.
Thanks for those
quite a few there.
Fantastic points, Councillor Honeyman. If I may, we'll just hold those for a minute because we're talking about the timescales of review of the policy, just specifically.
Yeah, but you got point, so that's why I came back. So.
Yes, thank you.
But I'm happy with within a year for the first time, because as you say, I think it's quite a moving feast anyway because of what's going on nationally. So I don't think you can sort of do the usual 2 years or whatever. So.
Right, would you like to make your proposal, Councillor Borman?
So I'd like to propose that this is reviewed within 12 months initially.
Okay. Second that. Would you say, sorry, when we say within 12 months, would you like to say sort of at the 12-month mark for this same meeting next year?
It depends on when these meetings fall.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so we're for the same meeting in next year's cycle. And we have a seconder, Councillor Walraven, and all those in favour of that proposal, unanimous. Okay, fine. Thank you. Right, yes, so coming to the policy more widely and the points that Councillor Honeyman has just made, which to me seem a little bit more like, yes, we've got examples of how things can be achieved. To me, that's starting to talk about strategy and how we actually achieve things in the policy, which would be great to have a discussion around. But the policy itself, actually, what we aim to do people have comments and feedback on the meat of it, points 1 to 12?
So kind of come back then. So those that's not going to be included, that last bit then.
Can we come back to that?
Okay, if you want.
Councillor Meek.
I think it's a very well put together policy. Thank you. And there's only one thing I feel is left out of it. Consulting with local groups and things like that, but I think, as Simon said, we're beholden very often to our higher authorities, and our immediately higher authority, the district council, has put together a huge sustainability aspiration and policy and everything, and it isn't mentioned here that we will be looking to them for advice about how we can achieve that in our area, because we are in the district. So, I feel we need to say that we're referring to what is going on in the bigger area, because sometimes we can't do some things because it's not within our remit to do that. And we would be looking to them, therefore, to say, we need to do this comes under your jurisdiction, therefore you need to help us to do this. So I feel up the way, even to ESCC as well, we need to be directing our requirements to them as well as interacting with them to say, we want to do this, but what is your policy on this? And if your policy isn't the same as ours, you need to change your policy. And as Simon said, we need to direct that pressure upwards so that we can get what we want. But I do feel that LDC have a very good sustainability plan, but I feel it should be mentioned in here that we will be working with our higher authorities directly and with the officers for those responsibilities and with the cabinet members for those responsibilities as they go up the way. Because I think that's really important, because then we get a cohesive plan, as opposed to us working in isolation and thinking, well, why isn't it working here? When actually, if Lewis has done something and it works, we should be going, oh, they did that and it worked. We should be able to immediately draw on that. It won't take any time to, therefore, draw on that expertise. It's already, the back work's been already done. We ought to draw on this, and if we can develop some ideas and initiatives of our own and feed them up to them, that's great. So then we're all working, but we need to be working off the same kind of, singing off the same hymn book, whatever it is. Yeah.
Same song sheet.
The song sheet. That's the one.
Thank you very much for that point. That will be noted. Councillor Matthews, sorry.
Actually, I'd just like to concur with those thoughts, quite honestly. You know, we don't want to be trying to reinvent a wheel that's already been spun.
So it's about appropriate positioning, working together with, and
Yes, good. I mean, I feel if we could have another point in there to say we will be working with our partners up the way, whatever, however you want to put it.
focusing upwards. Point 13. Okay. Councillor Matthews?
Addendum to your point really, Councillor Meek, was any kind of research or evidence that's been obtained by the council, I suppose, or the officers, could that be shared with the subcommittee? So if it's evidence-based, so how does that inform our decisions on how we want to make these changes to the town?
Yeah, what kind of evidence do
I
you
think,
sort of have in mind? Is it sort of schemes that have already
schemes
been
that have taken
running,
place,
or
so
particular data sets? Or?
So it can kind of help inform our decision making effectively. So so if I suppose if we've got, we're talking about sources of power maybe, so wind energy and solar power, which one might be better? You know, where we get no information from, so we're not just like trying to go with our own personal preferences.
Yeah.
So
sure, and I think
I'm not
that's
quite
also
sure how to word that, but I think
I think we're getting at it's knowledge sharing, knowledge transfer, and also I think that's something which will be quite key. Just quickly flicking back to the environmental implications section that we'd like to put into all the council reports there. You know, building on the existing knowledge base and bringing things in. So so I think we've got sort of a couple of additional points which we could be putting in this policy, which are kind of underpinning to some of the more
Thank you, Chair. Yes, interesting. Obviously, we've got a couple of district councils here. So when is an aspirational policy? Because in my eyes, it's not. So can you explain a little bit further, please?
Sorry, and
Since when is an aspirational policy?
okay.
Well, you're district councillors, and you obviously, you see what I mean? You see what I'm getting at there? We've all got aspirations. I'm sure the county council as well, and all the various other organisations. So you want to enlighten a bit more. You wouldn't want to.
So I suppose
you wouldn't want to write down how this is aspiration per se, because we've all got aspirations, haven't we?
Yeah.
So
I suppose in terms of policy, it would be to wherever possible to consult with other.
Which is what Councillor Matthews was trying to say to you.
Yeah.
He was trying to say if it's available, but I mean the aspiration is that published and through your chair and Councillor Meek. The LDC aspirations.
Of course, it's on the website.
Oh, right, so it's an aspiration, okay. Right.
No, it is a policy. It is a sustainability and
It's now
environmental
a policy, not an
which
aspiration.
which was formed at the beginning of the last administration. It's on their website. It's a huge document.
So it's 4 years old, isn't it?
It's, no, it's not. It's 3.5 years old because it took about a year to make it, I think.
Well, I'll look into that, Councillor Meek. It's just how you worded it, so no disrespect to you on that, obviously, it's...
Thank you.
I've got a point just on the policy in general and some of the wording. Try not to speak too academically here, but we've got terms like environmentally friendly, green, and so on and so forth, which I think colloquially we all understand. But I wonder if we need to be a bit more specific and talk about sustainability and perhaps even, in terms of minimising waste, regenerative methods and that kind of thing. I can see Councillor Meeks looking at me. No? Just to try and sort of pin things down, because with the policy, again, I think it's coming to Councillor Honeyman's sort of the intentions, but actually how do we, if we were then making a decision on something, do we have defined terminology to measure against and to decide against? That's something which will come into the specific environmental implications in other policies, but I think it would be good to get that pinned down in our policy in terms of, what is the wording and what's the specific meaning of things here. Anyone got any thoughts on that?
I think that's why it needs to come back for that review in a year's time, because it's only as we start to meet more regularly that we will understand what we want and how it's going to work for the town and the council and everything else, and that's when we can then start making these changes, and that's why it needs to come back regularly for probably the first 2 or 3 years.
Thanks, Councillor.
And just to add to Councillor Morgan, actually, if the science will change, there'd be more grants available and things which might determine or shape which direction we want to go in. So I think, having more regular reviews would be helpful.
Okay, well, we can always take that decision after the 1 year. We've had the motion gone forward for the 1 year now, so we can look at that next year maybe and see what the need is. So we've got, as far as, sorry.
I was just going to say, what we need to do this evening is there any alterations we want to do now before before it's presented at full council? Because there again, it'll be looked at again by the full council, and there might be other comments there which they want to put a feed in.
Sure.
So basically tonight we just need, if we want to add or take anything out before it goes to full council.
Yeah. Louise.
So the action on here says that actually you can make all your points, and then there is authority you can grant for the chair and I to collect all your points, amend this policy, and then take it to full council.
Yeah. Okay. So I think so far we've got a point 13, which is about working with other local authorities and organisations. We've got a point 14 about knowledge transfer, evidence-based data, keeping up with the science, that sort of thing. Anything else on the policy itself before we then discuss Councillor Honeyman's points about the last section?
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Chair. Yes, it's quite interesting about terminology, how it can change and everything, and you're really going to look at the development of when the pandemic was done, how words got interchanged and how it got changed a bit, and with the Brexit, with the flow, how Brexit went through as well. So you can say with the green initiatives now and climate emergency, certain words have got more importance than others and so on. But I mean, that's something to think about. But going into this, I don't think you want to water down some of the phrases too much, unless you want to. Can you do a glossary in a glossary in a policy? Does that help? Because that might be a bit more clearer for some people. Otherwise, you'll end up having it so generic it won't really mean anything. So I don't know if that's allowed a form of glossary.
I don't see why that wouldn't be. I think that would be
just
really
to help
helpful,
people a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that suggestion. Thanks. That's great. Okay. Right. So coming on to the last bit here, the paragraph which it says this can be achieved, for example, by. So this is kind of straying into the territory of how we're going to do this, but it might be useful to keep it in. We've had some specific questions about, for example, the second bullet point, using local websites to publicise the work being done on environmental matters by outside groups, and how that ties into the comms strategy, I suppose, for us and the council more generally. How do we know what's going on in the wider ecosystem in terms of groups and so on? I can speak to that a little bit, and I think there was a third point you had, Councillor Honeyman, that I...
Well, when you say local websites, you mean communicators generally. That can mean all sorts of places, knowledge bases, communications, couldn't it? It can be slightly wider.
I think perhaps it might be, sort of linking the town council website or with... Yes,
that's probably more... Using local websites, who wrote this? What's that really mean? I'm sorry, Chair, I don't quite know what it really means now. I'm looking at it.
Would you like to speak to that, Louise?
Yes, it was in the likes and dislikes of the list of the working groups. Okay. So I was a bit true to what was liked and disliked and popped it in. So this is the opportunity, if you now don't like it, to have a discussion and say,
Is it on this point, Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. I think I could help answer that.
Yes.
I mean, for instance, you could look on there's a website called Renaturing Seaford,
Yep.
which is an umbrella organisation for a whole lot of activity that's going
Yep.
on in Seaford. And it's treats of Seaford on the verge,
Yeah,
bugs and beetles and everything
Yeah.
else. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff there. That is a local website.
Yeah, it's a
So,
directory. Well, yeah,
then my second point would be, I don't think you need to be too concerned about it. This can be achieved, for example, by. It's not exclusive and it's not necessarily totally inclusive. It's just saying these are how you could do it, but there are probably lots of other ways you could do it. So it's not exclusive. And I wouldn't have thought that you need to worry too much about what's in that, because there are lots of other options possibly. Is that okay?
And I think also with this, working and communicating with local groups is going to be absolutely key.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know Councillor Buchanan is the outside body rep for the Ouse Valley Climate Action Project, which many of you know I work part-time for, so I'm not going to cross any lines and talk about things, but that project is mapping a whole load of activity that's happening around Seaford and wider in terms of renaturing, active travel, and other sustainability initiatives. So that will be a really good link to have for the council. And again, I think it's, Sea Hub and the other climate hubs which are also in that project, and being involved in the wider sort of ecosystem will be really important in knowing what's going on. Seaford Community Partnership obviously have various projects both within that and out with that. So yeah, that knowing what's going on, how can we be best placed to help? There are things which we'll do almost internally as a council. There'll be things which can also be used external facing, so like the plastic-free events charter as an example of that. And there'll be other things which we might support in other ways, or just help publicise, or it might be something that's happening on town council-owned land. So I think it'd be a question of how we're best placed to interact and support with things. Would be my thoughts anyway. So I don't know if we should have a point, something like that in there. We've got encouraging supplementary groups. Perhaps we need to sort of scope that point into something more wide, sort of to be working with other groups and organisations or maybe not working with, that might be the wrong term, but cognizant of, engage with other groups in the community. Does that sound reasonable?
Well, you certainly want to be engaging with others.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
And Councillor Hanneman?
No,
Half a hand up there?
actually, you said supplementary. What's that really mean? I mean, is that just stating the obvious from the point behind you in a lot of ways? But it's and 1 and 2. It's just reinforcing 1 and 2, isn't it? Really?
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. Leave it in. Go on.
Yeah, and I think the grant applications is good in there because it means we'll keep,
Yeah.
scanning for opportunities and. Yeah. Yes, Councillor.
So I think that was a new word that I learned at the hydrogen webinar the other day. Additionality. That's where you get grants from the government.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never heard of it before, but it was used.
Okay, great. Any further comments, suggestions, feedback on the draft policy? Right. Okay. Right. In that case, flip back to the right page, Chair. Right. So we recommend it to discuss the draft climate emergency policy, feedback, and agree that the policy is to be finalised by the head of Assets, Projects and Services, Louise, in consultation with the chair and myself of the Climate Change Subcommittee. May I have someone to propose that if you think that is reasonable? Councillor Raven, second. Councillor Buchanan. And all those in favour? Everybody, excellent. Right, we'll get that underway. Thank you very much, everybody. Right, that brings us to the end of tonight's agenda. I'm not sure if there's something official I have to say, is there? Well, in that case.
Good that thing in a minute.
Oh yeah, okay. Yes, Councillor Buchanan.
One last thing. I'm advised that we've just had the 3 hottest days ever on the planet since records began. So I think this may only be a tiny thing, but it needs to be taken very seriously.
Thank you for that. And one final thing I'll just quickly mention is that we're exploring making some training available to councillors and perhaps others on climate action planning, similar in a way to what some councillors have already done and what some councillors are doing through Lewis and what I've done already. So thank you very much for that. So yeah, the time is 8:15 p.m. So the meeting is closed. Thanks very much, everybody.